What if Anakin was killed in the Tatooine pod race? This is part 1. If you want early access to part 2 and other future videos, be sure to become a member of the channel. But let's get into it. As the dust settled over the Tatooine racetrack, a somber silence enveloped the crowd. Anakin Skywalker, a boy with unprecedented potential, lay lifeless amid the wreckage of his pod. His untimely demise sent shockwaves through the Force, ripples that disturbed the balance and reached as far as Coruscant. Master Yoda, sitting in meditation within the Jedi Temple, felt a profound disturbance, a beacon of light extinguished too soon. Qui-Gon Jinn stood frozen, his gaze locked on the site of the crash. The sadness that seeped into him was unlike any he had experienced before. It was not just the loss of a boy he had sworn to protect, but the crumbling of a prophecy he had believed was about to unfold. Beside him, Obi-Wan Kenobi sensed his master's despair.
"We must move quickly,"
Qui-Gon finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. The mission to save Naboo from the Trade Federation's blockade could not be forsaken, yet how could they proceed without the means to repair their ship or the Chosen One who was meant to bring balance to the Force? The two Jedi made their way back to Watto's shop, their minds racing to devise a new plan. Negotiations with Watto proved even more challenging without Anakin's victory as leverage. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, faced with the failure of their negotiations with Watto, found themselves at an impasse, the essential hyperdrive parts still out of their reach. The situation took an unexpected and violent turn when Shmi Skywalker, overwhelmed by grief and anger, took matters into her own hands. The blast from her weapon echoed through the dusty streets, leaving Watto lifeless on the ground. The shock of the moment hung heavy in the air. Shmi, her hands still trembling from the act of desperation and loss, turned to the Jedi. "Take what you need," she said, her voice a mixture of defiance and despair. The loss of her son had pushed her beyond the brink, and in her eyes, there was a flicker of something wild and unbroken. Obi-Wan hesitated, glancing at Qui-Gon for guidance. The gravity of the situation was not lost on them. The Jedi were not accustomed to such chaotic resolutions. Qui-Gon gave a subtle nod, understanding that their mission for the greater good must proceed despite the darkness that seemed to be closing in. Obi-Wan quickly went about collecting the necessary parts, while Qui-Gon approached Shmi. The walk back to Shmi's home was filled with a heavy silence. The reality of what had transpired weighed on Qui-Gon's heart. He had seen much in his years as a Jedi, but the pain of a mother losing her child was a profound sorrow that resonated deeply within him. Once at her home, Qui-Gon spoke softly to Shmi, offering words of comfort and solace. He spoke of the Force, of the interconnectedness of all living things, and of Anakin's bright spirit.
"Anakin was special, and his light will continue to shine in the Force."
Qui-Gon's words were but a small comfort to Shmi, yet they forged a bond of understanding between them. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan began to make his way back to the ship with the necessary parts to get back on track, but he would be ambushed by the Sith Lord Darth Maul. The Sith Lord, fueled by dark purpose and the element of surprise, engaged Obi-Wan in a fierce duel. Despite Obi-Wan's valiant efforts and his formidable skill with a lightsaber, the fight was uneven from the start. Maul's ferocity, coupled with the young Jedi's momentary shock over the unexpected attack, resulted in Obi-Wan being overwhelmed. Back at Shmi Skywalker's home, a cold shiver ran down Qui-Gon Jinn's spine, an ominous disturbance in the Force that screamed of loss and despair. Without a word, he bolted, a sense of urgency propelling him forward with the knowledge that something had gone terribly wrong. His worst fears were confirmed upon his return. Obi-Wan lay lifeless, a victim of the dark assassin. The tragedy compounded with the discovery that Padme Amidala, the young queen they had sworn to protect, was missing. The realization hit Qui-Gon like a physical blow. The mission had not only failed but had done so catastrophically. The Sith were no longer shadows of ancient myths. They had returned, bold and deadly, directly challenging the Jedi after centuries of hiding. Qui-Gon's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The loss of Obi-Wan, his apprentice, was a personal tragedy and a blow to the Jedi Order. But the kidnapping of Padme Amidala represented a strategic crisis that could have dire implications for Naboo and the galaxy at large. The Sith Lord's motivations were unclear, but Qui-Gon knew that Maul wouldn't stop with Obi-Wan's death and Padme's abduction. The dark side was making its move, and he was now caught in the middle of a galactic chess game with stakes higher than he had anticipated. Upon his return to Coruscant, Qui-Gon Jinn's arrival was marked not by the triumph of a successful mission, but by the heavy burden of loss and warning. The Jedi Temple, a place of serenity and strength, seemed to echo with the silent reverberations of the disturbance in the Force caused by recent events. Qui-Gon, carrying the weight of Obi-Wan's death and the ominous return of the Sith, delivered his report to the Jedi Council with a gravitas that commanded the room's full attention. The council members received the news with a mixture of shock and solemnity. The loss of a promising Jedi under such circumstances was a tragedy in itself, but the assertion that the Sith had returned after centuries of absence was deeply unsettling. How was this possible? They pondered among themselves. How could we not have sensed the return of the Sith? The questions hung in the air, reflecting the council's dismay and the unsettling realization that their vigilance might have been breached. Mace Windu, his expression grave, acknowledged the severity of Qui-Gon's report. "Your words are taken with the utmost seriousness, Master Jin. The return of the Sith represents a threat we cannot ignore." Yoda, ancient and wise, stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Investigate this Sith Lord. We must. Understand how our awareness escaped. We need to. A grave danger to the galaxy this represents." The council agreed unanimously that further investigation was necessary. While they trusted Qui-Gon's judgment and the evidence before them, the implications of a Sith resurgence required concrete verification and a deeper understanding of the threat. The council decided to dispatch a team of Jedi to Tatooine and other relevant locations to gather intelligence and seek out any trace of Darth Maul, the Sith Lord Qui-Gon had encountered. Additionally, the council resolved to increase their surveillance of galactic affairs, searching for any signs of Sith activity or influence that might have gone unnoticed. The possibility that the Sith could have operated undetected for so long was a troubling thought, prompting a re-evaluation of their strategies and the security of the Republic. As for Qui-Gon, the Council expressed their condolences for Obi-Wan's death, recognizing the depth of his loss. Yoda, in particular, offered words of comfort. "Grieve for your apprentice you must, but let it guide you, do not. In the Force, continue his legacy does." The meeting concluded with a somber acknowledgement of the challenges ahead. In the hallowed halls of the Jedi Temple, amidst the turmoil of recent events, Qui-Gon Jinn found himself approached by Master Dooku, his former mentor. Dooku's presence offered a semblance of comfort in a time of profound grief and frustration. The connection between master and apprentice, though evolved over the years, remained a bond of deep understanding and mutual respect.
The Council is too cautious. We need immediate action, not further investigation. The Sith are a threat here and now, not a shadow to be chased.
The Jedi have indeed become blinded, Qui-Gon. Blinded by the dark side, by our own arrogance. We believe we control the situation, but in truth, we are being led by it.
This confession from Dooku struck a chord with Qui-Gon. It was a validation of his own doubts about the Order's direction and its detachment from the very realities it sought to protect. Dooku, once a pillar of the Jedi Order, now seemed to stand apart from it, questioning the path they had taken.
The Council's inaction is a symptom of a larger problem. We've grown complacent, entangled in politics and bureaucracy, losing sight of our true purpose. The return of the Sith is not just a failure to detect a threat, it's a failure of our vision, of our connection to the Force.
Qui-Gon felt a stirring of rebellion within him, a confirmation of his own convictions that the Jedi Order must evolve or face its own downfall. Dooku's words echoed his fears and frustrations, providing a rare moment of solidarity between them. Yet, there was an undercurrent of something more, a hint of radical thought that bordered on dissent. Dooku placed a hand on Qui-Gon's shoulder, a gesture of mentorship and empathy.
Be wary, Qui-Gon. The path ahead is fraught with shadows, and not all of them lie outside the Order. Remember, the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. We must be vigilant, not only against the darkness without, but also the darkness within.
As they parted ways, Qui-Gon felt a renewed sense of purpose mixed with caution. Dooku's words, though troubling, had ignited a spark of determination in him. As the Senate chambers buzzed with heated debate over the legality of the Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo, an unexpected turn of events captured the attention of all present. Amidst the cacophony of voices, a hush fell over the Senate as a hologram flickered to life, revealing none other than Queen Padme, Amidala of Naboo. The Queen, previously reported kidnapped and presumed in grave danger, stood with a regal bearing, her image projected for all to see. Her appearance alone was enough to stir a wave of murmurs across the chamber, but it was her next words that would ignite a firestorm of controversy. With a calm yet firm voice, Queen Amidala made wild accusations against the Trade Federation, detailing their illegal blockade and occupation of Naboo, their attempts on her life, and the collusion with dark forces that threatened not just her planet, but the stability of the Republic itself. The Senate, already a boiling pot of conflicting interests and political maneuvering, reacted with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and skepticism. Some senators, particularly those from systems sympathetic to Naboo's plight or wary of the growing influence of the Trade Federation, nodded in agreement and voiced their support for the young queen. Others, however, swayed by the Trade Federation's considerable lobbying efforts or doubtful of the accusations without concrete proof, dismissed her claims as exaggerations or fabrications meant to sway the Senate to Naboo's aid. Amid the ensuing chaos, Padme's voice rose above the din, clear and resolute. She could see the lack of urgency, the Senate's indecision, and the tangled web of bureaucracy that delayed action while her people suffered. In a bold move, she requested a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum's leadership. Her rationale was piercingly straightforward. The current leadership had failed to protect Naboo and, by extension, failed the Republic by allowing political stagnation and corruption to undermine swift and decisive action. This request sent shockwaves through the Senate. Chancellor Valorum, caught off guard, struggled to maintain composure as allies and adversaries alike recalibrated their positions in real time. The call for a vote of no confidence was more than a political maneuver. It was a clarion call for change at the heart of the Republic, a demand for leadership capable of navigating the emerging threats and complexities of a galaxy on the brink of turmoil. The impact of Padme's holographic appearance and her call for action rippled far beyond the Senate chambers. It became a pivotal moment that would shape the course of galactic history, setting the stage for Palpatine's rise to power. Unbeknownst to many, the strings were being pulled by a master manipulator, using the crisis as a ladder to ascend to the apex of the Republic's political hierarchy. In the shadows, the Jedi and those aware of the dark side's movements watched with growing concern. The political upheaval in the Senate, while seemingly a matter of governance and law, was intrinsically linked to the larger, unseen battle between the light and dark sides of the Force. The fate of Naboo, the stability of the Republic, and the future of the Jedi Order were becoming increasingly intertwined, leading to a convergence point that would define the destiny of the galaxy.